وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on a state of Islam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on a state of Islam. Allahumma ameen. Amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the beginning of Surah Al-Anfal, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: وإذ يعدكم الله إحدى الطائفتين أنها لكم وتودون أن غير ذات الشوكة تكون لكم ويريد الله أن يحق الحق بكلماته ويقطع دابر الكافرين. This ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about the event of Ghazwat Badr. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قال إذ يعدكم الله, Allah is promising you that one of the group, you're going to have the upper hand of one of the groups, and one of the groups are either the caravan of Abi Sufyan, for those who study the seerah, or the battle in front of the against the disbelievers. Now, here the choice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you're going to have both of them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised them is either the caravan or either the triumph and the victory. Now, the human nature, subhanAllah, always will vouch for the easier one. So here we have the choice between al-ir or al-nafir. Al-ir is the caravan and the nafir is the battle. However, the choosing of the ir, which is the caravan, something is not going to have any benefit. And this is how the nature of the human being always inclined to the easier thing. But in the easier thing, then not the blessing. There will not be the true result that's going to bring this ummah up. So I said the ir, for this reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was reproaching the believers. So the ir, which is the caravan, by having the upper hand of it, taking the wealth on top of it, and then get to Medina, what is going to help the ummah, except this is going to be perishable, it's going to be ending. However, the an-nafir, which is the battle, in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is going to be the nobility, is going to be the honoring, and is going to be like lessons that is going to go to the end of time and cross all the generation. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَيُرِيدُ اللَّهُ, because you were inclining for the unarmed army or group. So you were liking that caravan part. So this is what our nature actually is inclined for. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَيُرِيدُ اللَّهُ. So here it comes the intent and the high objective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believer, to establish the truth and to uproot the falsehood. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ قَالَ لِيُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ وَيُبْطِلَ الْبَاطِلَ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. So in the establishing of the truth and the uprooting of the falsehood is indeed the greatest intent for the believer, which is must be the ultimate purpose of every believer. Because here, when someone has that tendency to incline to what is in this life, to have that worldly life, and the worldly life is, subhanAllah, is the nature of the human being, to love it, to be having, thinking of their way of living. So the way of living is to work hard and so on, and that's not actually the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when that inclination, as the companion, they had the choice, which is something easy, something to get the wealth and get home, that's not the intent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah created the believer for a great purpose, for the ultimate purpose, with uprooting the falsehood by establishing the truth. If someone, for example, subhanAllah, inclined to the first one, what is going to happen? He's going to be satisfied by this worldly life. By satisfying by this worldly life, he's going to end up corrupting his heart and her heart. And the corrupting of their heart, which is like corrupting that inside. Therefore, the perception will be altered, and he will not be able to see what is the truth as the truth, and what is falsehood as the falsehood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called in the Quran Al-Furqan and in Surah Al-Anfal. Therefore, they will be included or among those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about them, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا وَرَضُوا بِالْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. They are satisfied with this worldly life. وَاطْمَأَنُّوا بِهَا. And they feel, immense tranquility living this life. However, these people, they will be turning away from the path of Allah, turning away from the revelation of the Quran, because they will not be able to comprehend it. Why? Because their ultimate intention becomes just to dwell on this life. They've been heavily hanging or clinging to this life, which is like the gravity of this earth is holding them down. So there is no aspiration to look forward or to look to the vast horizon of this creation and the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is, whoever who does this, he will be from those who betrayed Allah and His Messenger. It might be a very harsh word, but it's not as that we have uttered, but is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the one who does not fulfill and honor the covenant with Him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in having the ultimate purpose to establish the truth and uproot the falsehood, therefore he's going to be betraying himself. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the same surah, O you who believe, do not betray Allah and His Messenger and betray your trust knowingly. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la takhunu Allah wa rasula wa takhunu amanatikum wa antum ta'lamun. Now, in this great objective, what's the meaning of this objective? Or someone say, believer, I want also to have this objective. How I'm going to do this? What are the guides? What are the steps to get there? One need to understand that establishing of the Furqan within ourselves, that is the meaning of piety. That means the meaning of the taqwa. So if someone said, what is the Furqan first? Is to have the clear distinction between good and bad, between truth and falsehood, between good and evil. So in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah. Oh Allah, show me the truth as the truth, and help me and guide me to follow it, and show me the falsehood as a falsehood, and help me, Ya Allah, to follow it. Because if we do not have the scale, if we do not have it right, then we have a corrupted perception. Look, people, they see, for example, in the system politics or the system of ideology or the system of philosophy, they put what is good on one side and what evil on one side, and the line between them is them who define it. For us, the view is a divine view. What is the truth is Allah said is the truth. What is wrong is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said is wrong. And based on this distinction, based on what Allah called criterion, that we can build our life and build our purposes and achieve our purposes. Therefore, it is not crucial or a necessity, is an obligation. And if the believer will not have that true aspiration, that true drive to do it, he will be from those who betray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wa Rasul. Now, when we say, building this Furqan, how can we have this Furqan to be built within ourselves? First, we need to understand one aspect very important. The Furqan through which is going to manifest the reality of the Quran, which is very important. What it means, manifestation of the reality of the Quran? For example, someone will ask a person who's not a believer, you say, how will you get your provision? You're going to say, I need to work hard. Working hard is making to make more money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you otherwise. Told you totally opposite. He said, is your piety who will bring you the halal rizq. It's the piety who's going to bring you the blessing. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. So this is haqiqatul Quran. This is the reality of the Quran. This is the truth of the Quran. If someone will follow the truth of the Quran, he will find the blessing. But he follows the truth of himself or him whims or the ideology that he's following, then he's going to leading himself or herself to corruption. So how, when we establish this criterion within ourselves, then we live our life according to the truth of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He called Badr, the battle of Badr, He called it Yawmul Furqan, the day of the criterion. And this is why He called it the day of the criterion, just as a reflection, is because in the day of Badr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established the truth, and He showed the falsehood that is perishable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the reality of the Quran, the truth of the Quran, to prevail on the battlefield of Badr. So if you see, on one side, you have one God who defeated 360 gods of Quraysh. That's the reality of the Quran. Allahu ghalibun alami. Always. You had people who are arrogant, having stubborn, people rejecting faith, deniers, people showing off. All the people of Quraysh, how they came showing off in arrogance to eradicate the path of the truth. On the other hand, you'll find people perseverant, patient, and tawakkul Allah, they have reliance on Allah. Which part whoever come is the patience and perseverance and tawakkul overcame over the the stubbornness over the arrogance. So here the haqiqat of the Quran, Allah is telling you, if you follow the perseverance, if you follow the sabr, then you'll be always the winner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it to be manifested into the battle of Badr. Other aspect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, what the triumph comes with the faith, does not comes with the power, does not comes with how much weapon you have. وَكَمْ مِنْ فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. How many small group have defeated the big group by the will of Allah, by the leave of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed it on the battle of Badr. He showed it as the believer, there were 319 according to the narration of Ibn Mas'ud, and the disbeliever there were more than 1,000, and they have more armament and more weapon. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed the believer that the power of the Iman is far greater than any other power on this whole universe. And this is the manifestation of the truth of the Quran, which is make the deen of Islam to prevail. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. He, the one who sent his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the guidance and the religion of the truth to make it manifested over all the religion. How is going to be manifested? With this truth. And you see it, subhanAllah, today in our people of Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower them with His mercy and help them and pour on them patience and save them and give them triumph and victory. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us patience here. Look how many people now they picking up the Quran and reading because they see the power of the perseverance in the heart of these Muslims. Why? Because where you find it, you're going to find it in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال إنما يوفى الصابرون أجرهم بغير حساب. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave the establishment of the follower of Musa by the sabr. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى وتمت كلمة ربك الحسنى على بني إسرائيل بما صبروا, because they patient. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be having the angels to be given the good news for the dwellers of paradise, telling them قال فنعم عقبى الدار بما صبرتم, because this is of your patience. So the patience here as a manifestation of the truth of the Quran in our reality, it connects with your common sense, it connects with your natural disposition. So then you know that this Quran has the domination, that the Quran has the ultimate truth, that this is the Quran over any other faith, and it is the religion of the truth. It is the religion of the truth. In a few words, what the believer has to do to really build this criterion. Before that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us go through trials, because the true believer has to act righteously upon this scale, upon this balance, which is the difference between good and evil according to Allah and the guidance of His Prophet. And then you're going to be yourself facing trials. So the trials here are a necessity for our life. What you're seeing even happening today in the world, especially in Gaza, and for every one of us here, the trial that you are encountering is a necessity to help you to correct you, to cleanse you, to give you tarbiyah, and to strengthen you. Because you will not be able to know the sweetness of patience if you do not go through trial. You will not be able to know the meaning of the power of the tawakkul if you do not go through trial. So the trial here is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the Badr was a trial. Ghazwat Uhud was a trial. Ghazwat al-Ahzab was a trial. But in this trial, there's a reformulation of the whole self. The more you get in the trial and prove patience, then you become stronger inside, stronger drive toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you realize that the most important thing in your life is to defend the truth, to stand for the truth, to fight for the truth, which is the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the true believers. That is the true believer. 6 actions that help us. All of them, if you go to Surah Al-Anfal, you find them. The first action that it helps us to build this criterion in our heart. The first action, when the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, your heart should tremble. The second action, when you hear the recitation of the book of Allah, your iman should increase. And when you do everything in your life, you should put trust fully and completely in Allah. This is 3 actions that build and strengthen the soul. The 3 other actions, listening and listening and listening, so you comprehend what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. And then the second is to answer to the call of Allah and His Messenger without being doubtful, without being indecisive, without questioning that because the answering of Allah and His Messenger what gives you life. And the third one, to be grateful for all the favor of Allah, because the more you remember the favors of Allah, the more you'll help you to safeguard your path on the Iman, and more you help you to continue to strive, because had it not been those gifts, someone will be already lost. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. The greatest purpose for every believer must be, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, to establish the truth within yourself and to uproot and erase the falsehood. And that will be only happening by building the criterion that we have mentioned. And the criterion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it to you as a gift if you follow the action that we have mentioned, and they are all derived from the Surah Al-Anfal. You'll find them in the first 4 pages. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them one by one. The first one in the first ayah, قال إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. Then he said أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا. Those are the true believers. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about the other action, and in the end He said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا. If you do fear Allah, if you do be mindful of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant you this criteria, will grant you this furqan. Therefore, it's in our hand to receive the gift of the furqan if you are truly people who truly want to have the furqan, truly intending sincerely to have the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if someone does not have that mindfulness, therefore he's gonna fall into being satisfied with this dunya. Satisfied with the dunya means that someone had his perception corrupted, and what is going to lead to be betraying Allah and His Messenger. قال إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا ويكفر عنكم سيئاتكم ويغفر لكم والله ذو الفضل العظيم. That's the greatest of the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you do so, Allah will reward you greatly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be watching over you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make easy for you the greatest of the reward. One small example to close with it. The example of Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood alayhi salam was a soldier in the army of Talut. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us the subhanallah, the evolution, if you can say, of Dawood in stages. He was someone who has the love of the truth in his heart. He was someone who had that great intention, a great purpose to establish the truth and uproot falsehood. So he joined the army of Talut. And then he came to subhanallah, to the test and the trial of the river. قال Talut, whoever will drink from it, he's not going to continue with me. And whoever will not drink, he's going to be one of me. قال ومن لم يطعمه فإنه مني إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده فشربوا منه. All of them except a few. From those few was Dawood, still holding that drive, that willpower to fight for the sake of the truth. And then this small group, they still have they've been scared. قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنود. We will not have any ability to meet and face Jalut, this giant, and their soldier. قال الذين يظنون. So from those who truly believe that they're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how many small group defeated big group by the leave of Allah? One of them was Dawood. And then when they stood subhanallah in the battlefield, قالوا ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah is going to be with the sabirin and with those who have the intent. So he was with this small group, and who's among them was Dawood. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated Dawood because of his true, genuine, sound, sincere heart to fight for the sake of the truth, submit completely and fully to Allah. He's the one who killed Jalut. فهزموهم بإذن الله وقتل داود جالوت وآتاه الله الملك والحكمة. Every one of you as a believer, if you do so, Allah will honor you as honored Dawood, and honor you as He honored always the believer. If you just be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make your great ultimate purpose is to establish the truth and uproot the falsehood. فنسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يثبتنا على الصراط المستقيم. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم ارزقنا الأعمال الصالحة واجعلها لوجهك خالصة. اللهم اقذف في قلوبنا رجاءك واقطع رجاءنا عمن سواك حتى لا نرجو أحدا غيرك. اللهم اغفر لنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأقم الصلاة.